Y'all hear me? We are going to try and talk in between the mics instead of actually into the mic, so if you can't hear us, let us know. Can you hear us in the back? Yes? Okay. Yeah. Hi, welcome to University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. I know y'all have heard that all day. My name's Jamie Parker. I'm Director of Field. We're going to do full introductions in just a minute, but I want to start, since it's after lunch, and everyone usually starts to drag a little bit after lunch, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. So when I say field education or internship, what are the things that pop into your mind? Just work? Practicum? What? Free work?
Stress? I heard stress.
It's not free, you pay for it. Okay.
200 hours.
200 hours. Experience. Figuring out what you like. Off campus. Networking.
Huh?
What? Field trapped. Okay.
Learning.
Applying knowledge and learning. Okay. Supervisor relationships. Yes.
First one I think of, not having a choice.
Not having a choice.
Track, not having a choice.
What else comes to mind? Time management. Hands-on experience.
Luck of the draw.
Say that again.
Luck of the draw.
Luck of the draw.
The real world.
The real world. Wondering what you'll be expected to do. Awesome. What feelings come up?
Excited.
Anxious, excited. Anxiety. Nervous. Curious.
Need to be prepared.
Need to be prepared. Empowered. Any other feelings that come up? Enthusiastic. Awesome. So we are the field team along with some students. So we are here to talk about field education, which is a big part of the degree. You probably saw when you were in the advising session this morning, 10 semester credit hours of the 63 will be in field education. So we're going to start with sort of just a glimpse. We've got only about an hour, so we're going to pack in as much information as we can in this hour with you. It's an introduction to field. We're going to follow up with a lot of information sort of between now and the time you start, and then we'll have a mandatory orientation that will happen a couple of weeks into the semester. So I'm saying all of that just to let you know that this is sort of a brief introduction. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in around field education over the next 6 weeks. And then we'll sort of check in again once you've gotten started in your placement to give you a lot of the real nuts and bolts and logistics of field. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to start with the field office mission statement. You probably have seen the mission and vision for the college, which we all are excited to be a part of. The field education office also has a specific mission statement. So we're dedicated to facilitating connection between knowledge and experience to empower meaningful growth, leadership, and social work identity. So what that means is that we are hoping to link you to an experience that will allow you to apply knowledge in a real-world setting, and you'll be able to enhance your own growth, leadership ability, and be able to really sort of fully try on your social work professional identity. That is what we are committed to. So now I'm going to say who we are. My name's Jamie Parker. I'm the Director of Field Education. I'm a clinical assistant faculty member here at the college. I graduated from this program in 2006. My undergrad is from U of H as well, so I am a cougar through and through. I consider myself a macro social worker. Most all of my professional career has been in program administration and development. I have taught classes here at the MSW program, but currently do not teach classes, just do the Director of Field position and teach BSW classes at U of H Clear Lake. So I teach an issues and ethics class there. So as a snapshot of who I am, I'll let Shelly introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Shelly Gonzalez. I am the Assistant Director of Field Education and an Assistant Clinical Faculty Member here at GCSW. I also graduated from GCSW 10 years ago, so it's been a little bit of a while. I'm new to this position. I just started this year. And before this, I was out in the community doing work with children and adolescents who are in the juvenile justice system. And I've been a field instructor since the moment that I could be. And I absolutely love field education, and I love working with students. And I loved it so much, I decided to do that full time. So that's a little bit about me.
Hello, I am Jackie Griffin. I am the assistant to the field office. I have 3 supervisors now. I assist Ms. Gonzalez, Ms. Parker, and Ms. Navisha Shaw, which is the hybrid online coordinator. I am the IPT administrator, so anytime you need any help with IPT, I'm the person that you call and contact.
Yes. So Jackie's worked in the field education office here on campus for 23 years. So really we work for her, but 24? Okay, 23. The years just keep going by. Navisha Shaw is also a full-time employee in the field office. She works specifically with the other enrollment models. So Shelly is your primary contact, so all face-to-face students primarily check in with Shelly as your field advisor, and then our hybrid and online students check in directly with Navisha Shaw in their field capacity. We also have a field office GA, so I'll let Morgan introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Morgan. I am the graduate assistant for the field office for this summer, and I am currently finishing my MSW and will be done in August. Thanks.
Do you want to say who you are real quick? Sure. There's a couple other current students here.
Yeah, almost. Macro advanced standing.
My name is Ashley Rowland, and I am a clinical second year.
And my name is Janelle Brinton. I'm a clinical second year full-time face-to-face.
Awesome. We're going to have the students do a student panel at the end of our session today so that they can give you some of their perspective on field education. So field is a large operation. So there's 500, there will be in the fall, about 500 of you enrolled in the MSW program. In the spring, we had almost 350 students who were in field placement courses and agencies around the city, around the state, and actually around the country. Because of our online program, we have agencies that are outside of our geographic location. So we are, at any given time, managing about 500 students plus their field instructors and agencies. So I always say we're managing about 800 people at any given time, sort of managing all the different enrollment models and where students are. I usually say that to try and incite some level of empathy for us, so that if we're not getting back to you right away, that might be why. But I also say that to empower you to continue to try and get the information that you need from us. Sometimes you have to send an email a couple of times. So it takes a large team to pull off field education. So we introduced the office staff, but we also have a field practicum advisory committee. So that's made up of field instructors, other faculty members, and students. So they advise the field office on issues in the community and on field education. So we have an ongoing team who is feeding us information from the community to help us improve and do the things with field the best that we can. There's also a team of field liaisons. So everybody that is assigned to a field placement will have, these terms will be explained more fully as you get into your placements, but we have a contract team of social workers who are hired by the college to serve as a liaison between the school and the agency. So this is someone who sort of just checks in periodically on your experience with the agency. They've usually worked with that agency for a couple of years. They stay with that agency every year. So they sort of know the agency, they know the culture, they know the field instructors, and they sort of monitor your forms. And if you've got any issues or the agency has any issues, they're the ones who will check in and be your first line of contact. there are what we call field instructors and preceptors. So everyone's assigned to a field instructor. A field instructor is a social worker who works inside the agency who's responsible for your educational experience there. So there are accreditation standards that say that that person should have an MSW and 2 years post-master's experience. That's the basic level of requirements. So as someone who has an MSW from an accredited program and has 2 years post-experience is who can qualify to be a field instructor. That looks very different in depending on the agency. So you may be working with someone in an agency all the time. So you might be, the two of you are like, every time you're there, you're with your field instructor. That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is that you see your field instructor once a week for an hour for supervision. And you're working with someone who's called a preceptor or maybe a task supervisor. So that may be someone in the agency who's got a different educational degree, isn't a social worker. So it may be a longtime case manager, it may be an LPC. It could be somebody else who you're sort of working day to day with, but then you're meeting with your field instructor to go over the educational components. Does that make sense? That's sort of the spectrum of like what your relationship with a field instructor looks like. And then...
And you can also be a field instructor 4 years from now, right?
Yes, 4 years from now. We'll be knocking on your door.
You'll be knocking on our door.
Yeah. So the last piece of that puzzle, of course, is you. So you really are the driver of your educational experience in field. What our goal is to facilitate that. We're connecting you with an agency. We're connecting you with a field instructor with an opportunity to learn, but it really is your job to sort of take control of that and to figure out what your goals are, what you want to get out of field, and what you put into it is what you'll get out of it. So from the beginning, I like to say that it really is you take control of your experience in field. So if you're just sitting sort of around waiting for something to happen to you, like it may not happen. Like you really need to start thinking now, moving forward, sort of what your desire is to get out of field education, to sort of go into it with an open mind, to be curious about what the agency and agency culture is and what you can learn there. Oh, the echo is really bad. Okay, so that is a sort of quick introduction. I'm going to hand it over to Shelley to take over the rest of this presentation, but we will likely co-present because it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut.
Okay. I'm going to turn this so that I don't stand in front of the words. Okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about what field education is, right? And kind of how we feel about it. So basically the short version is it's an opportunity where you're supposed to be integrating what you're learning in the classroom in a real world setting, right? So as you know, classroom work is kind of in a textbook and the real world doesn't really run like a textbook, right? So sometimes that connection is really difficult because you're trying to fit things together that don't look alike, right? So the reason that we have field education is so that you can be immersed in kind of what it's really going to be like so that you know what questions to ask, you know what you need to know and what you don't know, right? So it's to integrate and apply. So here at the GCSW, you'll have 2 field placements typically, okay? So the generalist placement is the one that you're going to be doing now, right? It's your first year. And you'll be placed with an agency, and you'll be doing field course 1 and field course 2 within that generalist placement. So it's 1 continuous experience, but 2 field courses. Does that make sense? And I know you guys have talked with advising already, so they've kind of talked to you a little bit about how that goes. So your generalist field placement is really supposed to be a broad scope, right? Let's say you really want to do macro and you're going to be in a place that maybe doesn't do a lot of macro, right? The purpose of it is just to get a general idea of what social work does, right? So you may or may not be having your first field placement at a place that you could see yourself 10 years from now, right? And like Jamie said, that's why you really have to be the driver of your own education, right? You're going to be in an agency and you need to ask what the opportunities are so that you can pick the ones that you think are most important to you, right? So it's a generalist placement, it's a broad scope, and you're going to do 200 total clock hours per field course in generalist placement. Okay, so you'll have 400 total clock hours for your generalist placement, and you'll do field course 1 and field course 2. And advising has talked to you about enrollment numbers. Okay, and then in your concentration year, you will do a total of 500 clock hours, so 250 clock hours per field course, and that's field course 3 and field course 4. So again, that will also be one continuous placement, but 2 field courses. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. And that one is more concentrated, obviously, more advanced, right? So more clinical, more macro, more focused on actual skills. Okay, so does anyone in the room know what CSWE is? Great. Okay, so they're the person that says you need to go to a place that's accredited, right? So they're kind of like the body in charge of policing social work education, all right? So there is a body out there that's in charge of saying this is what it is and this is what it isn't, and all programs that are going to receive accreditation need to have these kind of requirements, okay? So the 900 clock hours is a stipulation by them. The things that Jamie was saying about being a field instructor, those kind of requirements are also stipulated by them. Okay, so CSWE is kind of the driver of the fact that you're in a program that's accredited. Does that make sense? Okay, and CSWE wants social work education to be competency-based. So that's just kind of like a fancy word of saying that they want to incorporate both like thinking, skills, values, right? Effective processes. So it's like nuanced. It's not just like learn how to make a peanut butter sandwich, right? There's all this other stuff that goes in there. Like know why you make a peanut butter sandwich, know how to make a peanut, like all that other stuff. Okay? So these 9 competencies, they talked about them this morning, right? We're going to show them to you again because you're going to know these. They're going to be your best friend. You're going to have a relationship with them. Okay? So your field courses and what you're accomplishing will be based on these. And the things that you're learning in class will also be based on these, okay? And then here at GCSW, there's different processes for different enrollment models, different processes for different locations, okay? So we're gonna briefly go over the stuff that doesn't apply to you just so that you know that there's something other than you. Does that make sense? So there's inside Greater Houston and outside Greater Houston, okay? And the field office, the way that field is set up is that we really try to facilitate opportunities for connection, right? So some of you talked in the beginning about feeling like you're stuck, like you didn't have a choice, okay? So in your generalist placement, the field office is more directive, right? We are going to take more of a direct role in kind of helping you match with an agency. But again, what you get out of that agency and the connection that you make with them, that will be up to you. And then for your concentration placement, you'll take more of the driver role in that situation. So we will provide opportunities and facilitate opportunities for you to connect with agencies and set up interviews, but you're the person that's gonna actually like get the offer and accept the placement, okay? So we're just providing the opportunity and then you're providing the charisma to get yourself placed, okay? And then inside Greater Houston basically means that you live within one of these counties, okay? And the process is different if you're in or outside. Okay, so this is a GIS. That's like a fancy like program that does geographic mapping and data. So this is our agency map of Greater Houston. And for those of you that aren't from Houston, I wasn't when I started this program, it's like a target board, right? Like a dartboard. It's like all these loops people are always talking about. So we're like right by that 610 that's just kind of hanging out by itself, that number. Okay, so what do you guys notice about this map? What's your assessment of this map? Okay, concentrated in the loop. In the first loop, right? Okay, I was like, what? Okay, what else do you notice? Yeah, there's different color dots, okay? So the different colors signify the different types of placements available, right? Whether it's like medical, children and families, schools, things like that, hospitals. So what do you notice about the colors?
Blue looks like it's hospital.
Okay, blue looks like it's hospital.
They're scattered, generally.
Yeah, they're kind of scattered. There's a little bit more of one color versus the other.
There's a lot of red.
Lots of red, okay. Lots of green. Okay. Here, we could zoom up. Okay, so this map is to give you a good idea of kind of what we're working with. So Jamie told you that we have 500-ish students, right, in the program right now, and these are the agencies that we have to work with, okay? And those 500-ish students are diverse, live all over the place, right? So this is kind of how the process goes. So let me talk a little bit about the generalist matching process, because I know that's what you guys are all wondering about. Like, how do you figure out where I'm going to go and where am I going? Okay, so what we do is we take 3 very important variables and we do our best to match them to the best of our ability, okay? So the perfect match, like they work with your schedule, they're like a second from your house, you love the field instructor, you know, your clients bring you gifts every day, right? That's the perfect match, okay? Now, if you can envision a world that might be a little bit less than perfect, because you're a social worker, right, then you can understand how there's lots of other variables that kind of impact the perfectness of that match, okay? So one of them is agency need and availability. So again, you saw that map of all the agencies, but not all of them have openings every single semester, right? And not all of them can accommodate a macro student or a foundation student, right? Some of them can accommodate both or all, right? And some of them can't. So at any given semester, we're kind of coordinating what positions and spots are open. So that's the first thing, right? And then your student interest, right? So the things that you guys write in IPT, because you've completed that task because you're awesome like that, right? On your field application, we take those things into account too. Now, sometimes what you really want to do, like I said, is not what your agency does, right? Like also knowing what you don't want to do is knowledge, right? So again, your generalist placement is just supposed to be a broad scope. So we're just going to make the best of it that we can, right? But we do try to take in your interests as much as possible to kind of match you with something that might help you explore a little bit more if that's the direction you want to go or if it's not. And then a big thing here in Houston is your geographic location. That's why we use GIS mapping, right? So if any of you are from Houston, you know that the only season that we have here is traffic, right? Okay, and that to get from here to there, which is like 10 miles, is actually 10 hours, depending on what time of day you're going. So we have lots of students who just can't commit to driving 2 hours to get to their field placement, right? And so maybe they're gonna take a hit or they're not gonna be able to get, you know, their perfect match in terms of their interest because they're not willing to drive 2.5 hours away, right? So we're gonna take all these variables and do our best to kind of make the best match that we can. And then we'll basically identify that match, we'll reach out to the agency, we'll facilitate the connection, and then you'll reach out to them and you'll schedule an interview to kind of sit down and like get started with your relationship, okay? We're gonna give you tons of information about how to do that. You don't have to freak out, okay? But sometimes, you know, we have agencies' needs and availability that match student interest, but the transportation, again, is like a little bit of an issue. Or sometimes, you know, I can't travel, but this agency has an opening, and so I'm going to make a match with those two, right? See, they're all stars, is what I want you guys to notice, right? Stars are good. Everyone likes stars, and they're gold, so keep in mind that once you're matched, that matches are final, okay? And the reason for that is because, again, we know that you guys are absolutely fantastic and you can make a learning opportunity out of any situation, right? So again, that's what's so great about Generalist, right? And we're also trying to model for you, right, that we don't get to choose everything in our lives, right? Except for our attitude, which is so great, right? Okay. And then for your concentration placement, again, you'll be more of the driver, okay? So there's interviewing processes that will happen. But for the most part, face-to-face students that are full-time will go through Marketplace. So Marketplace is held in the spring of before your concentration year. So this coming spring for you guys. And it's usually held sometime in February. And you'll get lots of emails, lots of videos, lots of information about what to do, but it's kind of like a job fair, open market, where all the agencies that are accepting students for the next 3 semesters come in and they basically say, I'm macro, I'm offering this, whatever. And you can walk around and get to know people, you'll schedule interviews, and then basically what happens is you'll go through interviews and then you'll complete a matching process, okay? So we're not matching, what you're basically doing is facilitating a preference process. So you'll turn in a sheet that says, I want this agency first, this one second, this one third, and they'll turn in that same information, and then all we do is just connect dots, right? We love dots here, okay? So again, we'll talk more about that as we continue. Do you have a question?
Just a quick one, yes. As far as the initial placement, the first year placement, obviously I know some of the placements will be better known organizations than others.
Mm-hmm.
If we end up in one that's a lesser known, does that affect, have you found that that affects job opportunities later?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, because you have the opportunity to do 2 placements, right? Like you can supplement your experience, right? Whatever you've come in with, you can do things while you're here to build your resume. That I don't think that it limits. In fact, the social work degree, because you're doing 2 placements, I've heard from the community that a lot of other helping professions only do 1 if they require 1. So the fact that you've got 2 on your resume and 1 that is sort of generalist in nature, so it's sort of, I understand sort of how basic needs and services are offered in the city, is something that it actually is beneficial. That's a good point, though, that I will say about first year placements. So generalist placements, so a lot of, like some of you may be interested in medical social work. Yes? So like medical settings primarily do not take first year students. So most all of our hospitals or medical settings take second and third year students. So that's not driven by us. I would place you all in medical settings if I could for the first year, but they've made a determination that they will only take advanced level students. And that is sort of the case for a lot of agencies. So agencies that are doing intensive clinical work, intensive like medical settings, most of them only take second and third year students. So they'll be at Marketplace, that's what you'll be able to choose from. First year placements are generalist in nature. So it's basic needs, it's schools, it's nonprofit agencies in the city. It's sort of that kind of opportunity is generally what first year placements look like. Yes? We've started gathering all the information, yes. So the timeline is that the first week of August we'll release matching information to you. Is there a slide on that later?
Yes. There's 3 people who haven't completed their IPT. So if it's you, you're one of 3 out of 100. So please do that. Question. So we'll talk more about field placements, and when you get matched, you'll receive an email that basically will tell you how to figure out where your match is, but then it'll also have an instructional video with it. Like, here's how you contact the agency, here's things that you should say, here's how you're gonna start the onboarding process, this is the paperwork that you're gonna do. Plus, we're gonna talk later on, but you're gonna have a mandatory field orientation where we'll go like super in depth about that. So this is just to tell you kind of how the process works. Okay, does anyone else have any general questions? Yes. So that's the confusing part. So it's 1 continuous experience, but 2 field courses. Does that make sense? So generalist is field 1, field 2. Concentration is field 3, field 4. Okay. Question?
Piggybacking off of that, do we have to get the field placement during the winter break, or do we get
You will work that out with your field agency. So again, we'll talk about hours and all that stuff like that in that video that we send to you.
Earlier, they told us about like 4 options, like global and the Austin thing.
Mm-hmm.
If we were to choose that, how would that work?
So for first year like it depends on what the opportunity is. So typically first year students that go to Austin will go to Austin in the spring and come back and complete Field 2 in the summer, is how that has worked out in the past. So it just depends on, like, you may be able to get enough hours to finish things, before you leave to go to Austin, but if not, then typically we negotiate with the agency for you to take a break and come back for the summer. So it's all individual depending on where you're placed and what opportunity you engage in. I will also just plug the Austin experience. I did that when I was a student here, and it was amazing. If you're at all interested in policy, it's a great experience.
Okay, let me continue, and then if I don't, write your question down, and if I don't answer it, then we'll go over it at the end, okay? I just want to make sure we get through most of the information. Okay, there are some situations that are going to affect your degree plan and affect kind of how field goes. So that was exactly your question, right, about Austin, right? So that's a specific situation that would impact kind of the timeline of field and kind of how you would go through the field process, okay? And for all of these situations, you would definitely be contacting the field office, and then we will have videos and information that you can read and consume in order to kind of understand how the process goes. I just want to make you aware of what the situations are, not like go in depth about how they work, okay? Does that make sense? Okay. So if you're a transfer student, so if you've arrived and you've got some credits already, that's going to impact kind of how your coursework goes, and that could also impact when you do field. Is anyone a transfer student in here? Okay, a couple of people. And then dual degree, like if you're doing MPH or law with your MSW, that's also going to impact when you're going to be signing up for field and doing your placement. Advanced standing, so that's not you, but I'm sure you've been hearing that word all day. So just to explain a little bit about what that means, an advanced standing student means it's somebody that got a BSW, and so they don't have to do a generalist placement because the placement that they did in their BSW counts for those hours. So that's the difference. So you're in a big group of people today. Some of you are foundation students and some of you are advanced standing. That's what that means, okay? If you change your enrollment model, so if you go from face-to-face, full-time to online, again, that process requires approval. It requires exceptions. Those things you would talk to the advising office about, but if there's circumstances that would necessitate that change, it would also impact your field. Scholarships and fellowships, so somebody brought up Globe, right? There are certain scholarships and fellowships that have a field component. So if you have a scholarship or a fellowship and we don't know about it, let us know about it, or reach out to us and let us know, just to make sure that we're helping you meet those requirements. But for the most part, we have lists and we're incorporating that in our decisions. And then when you do a concentration in your field placement, that'll be on you, right, to make sure that you're interviewing with agencies that can meet those requirements. Field at place of employment, so really briefly, there you can have the opportunity, if you work in a social service agency, to do field at place of employment. There's some requirements and stipulations of the agency in that situation in order to qualify. That's an approval process also. You'd have to fill out a form and go through the field office to fill that out. But I just want to give you enough information so if that's something that you would be interested in, you know how to go about addressing that. And also it would be additional, right? So you can't work like 9 to 5, like 40 hours a week and then just count those hours as what you're getting paid for and for field, right? It would be like you're doing that work and then you've got this additional work that you're doing that's like learning, right? That would be a little bit different. The task would be different, you know, the hours would be different, that kind of a thing. So it doesn't mean that the place where I work is counting as my field placement. It means that I'm going to do it at the same place, but it needs to be a separate learning opportunity. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And then the last one is field elective. So again, in your generalist placement, each field course is required 200 clock hours, okay? So if you are at an agency that requires a little bit more time, or if you volunteer to give a little bit more time to your agency, if you get an additional 250 hours on top of the ones that are required for us, you can qualify for a field elective. Okay, so just like you would take an elective, like an elective classroom course, you would have field elective, okay? And that would be worth 3 semester credit hours, and it would be 250 clock hours that you would do in field, okay?
We can talk about that more, but the most common way foundation first year students do the field elective is that they'll stay through the summer. Like if you're at your agency, you want to continue through the summer, so you're there in the fall and the spring, and then you could stay through the summer and complete those hours and enroll in a field elective instead of a classroom course.
That'll count towards one of the electives.
Correct.
Yes.
It would take the place of an open elective, a classroom elective.
Yes. She's asking about a stipend, if there's any places where you can receive a stipend at your field placement. Yes, there are places that have stipend in first year too, right?
So I would say for first year placements, like if they have a stipend, it's usually typically very low. Like
It's for like travel or parking.
It's a very small nominal amount. So that we don't even keep track of who has stipends and who doesn't for first year placements. Second year placements, that is something that they'll typically talk about at Marketplace and that they'll advertise, because it's a range of stipends, but typically stipends are more associated with advanced or concentration year placements.
Good question. Okay, how are you guys doing? Everyone's getting sleepy. Should we jump up and down? No, no one wants to? Okay. You can jump up and down if you want. No? Stretch? Okay, everybody stand up. Okay. So we want you to know about important field resources. And the reason we want you to know about that is because you are going to have questions. We are going to run out of time to answer everyone's questions. You're going to think about questions after we leave here. We want to empower you to find the answers to your own questions. Okay? So we want you to know that there's going to be Blackboard, and then there's going to be a newsletter that goes out through the advising office that's going to have a field corner, right? So there's going to be information communicated to you in lots of different venues, right? Reminders on text, like face-to-face. You guys are going to be talking about it in your cohorts. There's going to be newsletters going out, Facebook pages, all sorts of stuff. Also, we want you to know that there's a mandatory field orientation meeting. So this is something where you'd pull out your phone right now, because I won't be offended, and you'll make the date and put an alert, okay? So you guys are having it the 4th Wednesday in September from 4:30 to 6, and that will be here at the university. The 4th Wednesday in September. What day is that? Or is it the second?
Is it the 4th Wednesday or the 4th? That's too late.
On the important,
It's the second.
on the important dates thing, it says September 12th is the mandatory field meeting.
Yeah, that sounds better.
It is September 12th.
Okay, it's September 12th. Sorry, it's the second Wednesday. I was going to say. Sorry. Ignore that. Everyone write it on your little thing so that you don't look back at it and get confused. Okay? It's September 12th. Same time, though. 4:30 to 6. It's a Wednesday.
So you have a sheet that has a correct date in your folder. So there's one that's got important dates. The screen sheet has the right date.
But
September 12th.
on your PowerPoint, cross that out.
Okay, so
We'll send out reminders.
yeah, we're going to send out reminders too. So that meeting is where we will really delve into like how to fill out forms, like what a field instructor does, how to set goals, like what's expected of you, when you're going to turn stuff in, what deadlines look like, how many hours like you should be doing a week, and all that stuff like that. Okay. That process we'll be talking more in depth about field. The reason that we're doing it after the semester starts is because we want to give you a chance to be in field, at least a little bit, so that you can know what questions you have, right? So that's what that meeting will be, and it's mandatory, so everybody needs to be there.
So this is the orientation meeting, not the...
For field orientation. Then there's an open FaceTime field meeting that happens every semester, okay? You guys won't go this semester because you have a mandatory meeting and you don't need to go to 2 meetings because we're going to be talking about the same stuff, right? But we're telling you now because every semester after this, if you have field questions that come up, or if there's like a break between when you're going to start your next placement, or you don't, you want to do a little bit more orientation before you start your concentration placement, right? Those will always be available to you, okay? And those meetings are for any enrollment, whatever, and they're always going to occur at the same time, okay? And those meetings, you can bring your questions, ask your questions in advance. We'll probably be recording them, and they will probably be through Zoom meeting, okay? All right, and then a couple of other resources. There's, like we have student panels here today, you're going to have mentors and ambassadors that are students, right? Those people are invaluable, right? Those people have recently done this process. They can answer your questions. You're going to have a representative in each of your cohorts that you can kind of talk to that's going to be plugged in with all the know, right? So reach out to people in order to kind of ask questions and get help. And then us, the field office staff, right? We're a great resource. We're always available. Our office is located on the 2nd floor on the opposite side of the floor from the student lounge as you get off the elevator, okay? So we're available. We're here to help you with the field experience. There's no dumb questions. So feel free to contact us if you need anything. Also keep in mind, like Jamie said though, we have a large number of students. We're working really hard on our response time. So if you don't get your question answered within 24 hours, then reach back out again, right? Keep reaching out until you get your questions answered. And then the last, and I'm gonna say maybe one of the most important resources you have is IPT. So IPT is that online system. Raise your hand if you received an email. All hands should be up. Okay, raise your hand if you didn't receive the email. Okay, good, yay, success. Okay, so since you all received the email, you all completed it, right? Because it had instructions about things that you're supposed to do. Okay, so when you go into IPT, that first screen, the home screen, right, has like a bulletin board in the middle. It has like these links to things. So we're gonna be putting videos, instructional videos about how to do some things on there. Our field manuals on there with all of our policies and procedures. Feel free to read it during your Christmas break, right? So a lot of information is gonna be housed in IPT on that home page. So if you have a question, I would check there first. And if you don't get your question answered after that, then reach out. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And then, yeah. Okay, we're not going to really go over this in depth. You have it on your paper. We're going to talk about these policies much more in our mandatory field meeting. But what we really want to communicate to you is that although field doesn't impact your GPA and it's pass-fail, It is a class. It is a course. You have to enroll in it. It has semester credit hour weight. You can get terminated from it, right? It could impact your ability to stay in the program if you receive a U, okay? So you won't have to do any necessarily outside coursework with Field. So Field is kind of all contained in itself. But we want you to know that it is a course, right? Just like you're required to do so many courses, they have to cover certain things by CSWE. This is part of that too. So it's not, you chose it by choosing this. Does that make sense? Okay, let's go to our student panel. I think that's gonna be the most important thing for you guys to hear from other people who have kind of gone through this process. And our fabulous professional soon to be employed or employed social workers, which is our ultimate goal, right? So we've kind of put up some questions that we're going to have them each go over, but then when we get to the end, if we have some time, we'd love to have you guys ask questions too. Okay? So we got a little introduction about who they were and kind of where they are in the process. What we'd like them to do is, did you guys talk about your population?
No.
Okay, just talk about field placements and population.
So again, my name is Morgan, and I didn't say this earlier, but I'm an advanced standing clinical student. And my internship, I worked with medically complex cases in an outpatient program. So that means they don't stay at the hospital overnight. And I worked with adolescents and children. Yes, that's it.
And my name is Janelle, and I'm a second-year full-time face-to-face student. Last year, I worked with youth in the juvenile justice system.
My name is Kayla Laywell. Again, I'm an advanced standing macro student. I finished my internship with the macro homeless organization.
And my name is Ashley, and I'm a full-time face-to-face clinical second year. And I was with Janelle, so I also worked with youth in the juvenile justice system.
Can y'all say where you're going?
I'm going to work with kids. Sorry, I haven't actually thought about how to say this. With kids with autism in an outpatient setting. There we go.
I'm going to the Veterans Hospital.
And we graduated, so we're
You're
doing
going
a
to be
job.
employed.
Yes.
They
Okay.
gotta pay me.
Okay, our next question is advice or things that you learned about time management, because that's a giant thing for most people as you're incorporating field, maybe a job, families, things like that.
So for me, I am a huge proponent of calendars. So I used a Google Calendar and a paper calendar because I'm type A like that. But my advice for that would be to be open and communicate with your field organization. So in a perfect world, you'll say you're going to be there Monday, Wednesday, Friday from this time to this time, but there might be a project they need you to attend. There might be some weeks you work extra hours and other weeks you work less. So make sure you're communicating that with your field and that you have the same expectations as your field instructor. And then also just being honest with yourself about extracurricular activities, because it is important to be involved, but it's also important to make sure that you have time for self-care. I mean, that's a very big buzzword, but that also, when I came to orientation, someone told me that also means scheduling time to pay your bills, make sure you have a place to live, and making sure that you're doing well in your coursework, and call your brother once a week, or whatever your priorities are, that you're still able to schedule those in.
Google Calendar. At the beginning of the semester, put all your class assignments into your Google Calendar so that you can see it at a glance exactly when every assignment, test, whatever it is, hits. Also put all your scheduled hours for field in, and that way you can just see where you're full, where you aren't, where you have some time to work ahead, where you're going to be really busy. I relied on Google Calendars.
So I think you've already heard, if at all financially privileged, don't try and get a part-time job. But something that I realized earlier today was that between field and classes, like actually being in classes, and the readings for classes, and travel time to and from all those things, you start to blur in your head what is work and what is school and what is personal. personal. So I think it's really important. I failed at this my first semester last fall, but like try and schedule out time to like be yourself, to do things that you enjoy, to like have time with your partner, to chill, because it's so hard to find that in all the mix.
Yeah, everything that they said. And I think the other thing is it's going to depend on where your field agency is and what they are requiring from you. But knowing the experiences of everyone that I met in my first semester, a lot of field agencies tend to, because you are, I mean, someone said it earlier, it's free labor for them. In some cases, that's how they view it. So a lot of the times they may be asking you to do more things because they know that you're eager and you're wanting to learn. And it's important after a certain point, if you do start to get overwhelmed, which you probably will because it gets real stressful for a little bit, knowing when to say, respectfully, to say no and to start to turn down the things that you know aren't super important, so in order for you to help take care of yourself and take care of your own life. Because it's just like you said, that line gets blurred so quickly when all you're doing is going, and for a lot of you it'll be 4 out of 7 days of the week, so it's going to be really, really crazy. So knowing when to say no when you reach that point, or being firm with your boundaries at the beginning, is a really important part of it. And it'll just depend on your agency. But.
And Janelle and Ashley, will you guys shed any light on the difference in workload from first semester to second semester?
I felt like first semester was more overwhelming. And a lot of that's just your learning curve. You're new here, you're trying to get used to what does it mean to be a graduate student, how do I balance everything, how much time does each sort of task require of me, you know, what does it take to get a good grade, all that kind of stuff. So by second semester you've hit your stride and it's starting to come a lot more smoothly. So your first semester will probably feel the most intense, and by the time you're done with it, just know it gets easier from then on out.
It's challenging in different ways, I think. But after that point, once your second semester starts, you're already comfortable with one huge part of your life at this point, which is your field. Because I think most people, your jobs aren't going to change drastically unless your agency is structured like that between first and second semester. You may have to shift some days around, but other than that, you're going to be pretty comfortable with where you are. You're already going to know your supervisor. You're going to know if you're with other interns. We were in a group of 4 of us who were all from different cohorts, so there's a lot of, we already were comfortable with each other. So it was a lot easier to kind of focus all of my, or more of my energy on trying to learn about these new classes that are challenging, but it's kind of it's placed in a different way. So I definitely think first semester is more challenging, and once you make it through that, you can make it through anything. So.
There you go.
Yeah.
You're set up to make it through anything.
Yeah.
Okay, what about a challenge, and you can all answer, or just a few, whatever you want. A challenge you faced in field and how you coped with it.
So for me personally, along with the hurricane, which was its own thing for everyone, we all dealt, like, all affected all of us in a completely different way, and that required a whole level of everything. My mom went in the hospital for 6 months, 2 weeks into the semester, or I'm sorry, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, not 6 months. But regardless, it was a very large thing that happened, and I had never had to deal with a medical issue of a family member while I was in college, because I had been really lucky. So for me, having life thrown at you that quickly, along with this time where everything is changing and nothing looks the same, and you're meeting all these new people, and you're trying to figure out, like, I feel like I'm just want to cry all the time, but I also don't know how to tell the people around me because I just met you. Like, that's a weird thing. So I think, looking back, that was for sure the biggest challenge, but the thing I learned from that is if you've never gone through something like that, where you have just life in general gets thrown at you and you get really overwhelmed, being able to, or just taking the initiative to share that with your field supervisor, your professors, if you think it's going to affect you academically, it's so important. Because I never wanted to ask for help. I always wanted to just be the one to say, like, I'll take care of it, it's fine. But it wasn't. The professors here were all, like, absolutely incredible, and once they know that you're going through something, they will do absolutely anything that they can to help you. My supervisors were fantastic, and I had this little community that just kind of, like, came around me, even though I barely knew anyone at the time. So I think being able to reach out for help when things get overwhelming can go such a long way. And that doesn't even need to be something major. That could just be, like, I got a bad grade on a test and now I'm freaking out because I think I can't do grad school. Like, talk to the people around you, talk to your professors, it goes a long way.
And piggybacking on what she's saying, everyone has imposter syndrome. everyone is feeling insecure. Everyone's doubting themselves. Everybody is wondering when the moment comes that they reveal that, they're not really a social worker and this isn't really where you're supposed to be. We all feel that way. You're supposed to be here. You belong here. You were chosen to be here for a reason. And that experience and that anxiety, you're sharing it in common with everybody. But the reason I say that is because I feel like in that sense of kind of vulnerability and insecurity, it can be difficult to speak up like you were talking about when something is actually becoming a real challenge for you, because there's this pressure like I have to prove that I can just handle it all by myself so that I can prove that I'm really supposed to be here and that I'm good enough and that sort of thing. Don't do that to yourself. Everybody goes through challenges. Everybody has life happen to them. Everybody has just stress in general, just the demands and rigors of learning a new thing happen to them. And we're all struggling in that same way. And it is okay to struggle. It's okay to share how you're struggling. Nobody's going to look at you and be like, why can't you handle this? Everybody, we're a college full of social workers. We want to support and help each other. So just the more you can reach out and get that support, the better it'll go, I think.
I'll share a challenge at my agency. When I first started my agency was the same time Harvey hit. So there were a couple of changes logistically there, but then also there were quite a few staff changes, employment changes with the other professionals other than the social workers at my agency, because I worked with an interdisciplinary team. And so one of the challenging parts about employment changes was that who I worked with changed. And so really a huge thing that helped me was speaking and talking with my supervisor. Like, okay, so this is this person, this is who I need to report to now. Really communicating and asking a lot of questions when things did change, because as people change in roles can change. And so just like being aware that like real life happens in your agency. You might be there fall, spring, and summer, especially if you're doing like an elective. So that might be a long time. And there are employment changes that might happen that also might help you develop and learn, okay, when I'm in a role, this is how I want to work, this is how I don't want to work, and just communicating with your field instructor and supervisor about what their expectations of you and what the agency's expectations of you are.
My agency was involved in a lot of the Hurricane Harvey recovery efforts, particularly for housing. And so it was a really cool experience to be able to see a mass effort like that happen and come together for recovery. But it was also like incredibly intimidating, because I'm like, I'm just a student. I don't know if I can actually help with all this. Like there's big collaborations and stakeholders meeting at George R. Brown, and it was exciting things. And so by October, I had that like sobbing in my supervisor's office, like I don't belong here, like imposter syndrome to the max. And I think it's like if I had come to my supervisor earlier and just said like, this is scary, can I do it, and had that conversation earlier, because you can, like that's why you're here. But also recognizing that like they're scared too, and like we're all human and we can get through it together.
Okay, we're gonna move it along. So we're gonna end with just, if you guys could give one piece of advice to yourself at orientation, what would you say?
So we had a student panel this morning with a different cohort of students, and one of the advice pieces that I gave and another student gave like work really well, so I'm going to use what she said as well as my own advice, and say that you're a professional student. So kind of treat your class as a professional student, your agency as a professional student. Everywhere you go is the opportunity to enhance your education if you take it. So if that means showing up early to class to build relationships with your peers, because they're going to be the people who you're working with in 2 years, then do that. If that means asking your boss, like, hey, I really want to be involved in this research project. I know I'm a clinical student, next year, but I really want to do this. They're probably going to say yes. Like, they want the research too. Get involved and seek opportunities and ask to take on other things, and make sure that you can be a professional student in aspects of your education, but then also with network opportunities that the GCSW holds, and as well as in the classroom.
Two quick things, and I'll kind of move it quickly, but one is, and you kind of said it, and I just kind of want to be explicit about this. you can go to your field supervisor and say, hey, can I get hours if I do this other thing? And it'll be a conversation, but often if you go to one of the like CEUs or workshops that are happening around here all the time, if there's some connection between that topic and what you're doing in field, and if they have the hours to spare. I mean, you have to attend to your core responsibilities, and you can't do that instead of your core responsibilities. But if you want to get some extra hours and they have it to give, often field instructors are really open to that, especially if you went out and you found the workshop or the CEU that you really want to go to and you feel will add to you. Those opportunities are around here all the time, and I've loved the workshops I've gone to. I've loved the CEUs I've been able to attend. Often you can go for free as a student, where once you graduate, you have to pay for those. So it's a really great opportunity to kind of get a sense of what's out there with workshops in a way like much more affordably than you'll be able to once you're graduated. And the other piece of advice I would say is this isn't something to worry about, but it's something to start to get excited about. Start to think about what sorts of opportunities, what sorts of placements you want for your second year placement. And I mean, I don't mean to get you too far ahead of things, but that's going to be where you start to choose your direction, because that'll be your first experience towards whatever career goals you have for yourself. So just start to put your ear to the ground. You don't have to do anything at this point. I mean, you've got plenty to do right now, but if you run into second year students or social workers in general, ask what agencies they're in, ask what kind of experiences they're having, ask how they like their placement, who are the big names in what you do, what kind of experiences are students having. You want to start to have those conversations as the opportunity presents now. Don't need to stress about it, don't need to worry about it, but just start to get exposure to that so that when Marketplace comes around, you really have a sense of which agencies you're excited to meet.
Take risks, ask a lot of questions, shake important people's hands, and tell them to remember you when you graduate.
Yeah.
That. But also, I think that something that I heard a lot, chose not to listen to until it slapped me in the face, was you're going to be really uncomfortable for a lot of the next semester, if not the next year, and maybe the next 2 years. I'm still uncomfortable, let's be real. But being uncomfortable is what makes this whole process so fantastic, because not a lot of people at this point who get to go to grad school and have the privilege to be able to do it are able to get the amount of new experiences that you're about to get in the next year, in 2 years. So I think that there are going to be times where you don't want to do things because they seem uncomfortable, whether it's at your field agency or doing role plays in class, because you're going to do a lot of those, and you're going to have to get up in front of people, and you're going to have to talk, and you're going to want to die. But it's fine. And it's going to be worth it in the end, because those are honestly the moments from the last year that I have learned the most from, are the ones that I was like so painfully uncomfortable that I kind of just had to figure out what in the world to do. And that's the beauty of this whole entire program, is you're going to be uncomfortable, but that's going to be the most valuable pieces that you take away. So just get ready for that.
Thank you guys so much.
Do you have a piece of advice you would give your orientation self?
Let me see if I can remember my orientation self.
I have one.
I do, actually. When I was in my undergrad, I had a professor that said, never let your education get in the way of your learning. And I didn't know what he meant by that. And I think my foundation year, I just kind of focused on school the way I always had, right? Completing, getting grades, going through it. And then when I got into my concentration year, I realized, shoot, I'm gonna have to do this. And I like memorized stuff for a test, and now it's like gone. I'm not absorbing it. I'm not having a relationship with this information, right? It's just like going in and out. So I think my biggest piece of advice is realize that this is school. This is opportunities for learning, right? But you have a life, and this is part of your life, but it's not all of your life, right? And think about how this becomes part of who you are, right? Don't walk out of these doors with a grade, because you